In suburban Westfield, a marketing executive was about to discover the price of family betrayal. What started as wedding planning took a shocking turn when her fiancé revealed his family knew her darkest secrets. Emma Rodriguez wasn't your typical bride-to-be. For years, she had built her life on control and loyalty, known for protecting family at all costs. When she uncovered her sister Claire's devastating betrayal, Emma had no idea she was about to cross a moral line. Her quest for revenge would lead to one phone call that destroyed everything. What began as a broken engagement became a war between sisters that left no survivors. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Emma Rodriguez stood in her living room, surrounded by the careful orchestration of 3 years' worth of dreams. Wedding invitations sat in neat stacks on her dining table, their cream-colored edges catching the afternoon light filtering through her apartment windows. The florist's samples, white peonies in Dusty Miller, were arranged in glass vases across her kitchen counter, each one a small promise of the perfect day that was now just 21 days away. Her marketing executive mind had approached wedding planning like any successful campaign, detailed timelines, backup plans, and contingencies for every possible scenario. Except this one. David's key turned in the lock with the familiar scrape that had become soundtrack to their shared life, but something in the weight of his footsteps across the hardwood floor made Emma look up from the seating chart she'd been adjusting for the 3rd time that week. His face carried an expression she'd never seen before, not quite guilt, not quite resignation, but something that made her stomach drop before he even spoke. We need to talk." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was already burning. Emma's fingers tightened around the calligraphy pen she'd been using to address place cards. 3 years together had taught her to read David's moods like weather patterns, and this felt like the moment before lightning strikes. "About what?" she asked, though some deep part of her already knew she didn't want the answer. David's gaze swept across the wedding preparations that had transformed their shared space into something that looked more like a bridal magazine than a home. His eyes lingered on the sample bouquet, the fabric swatches pinned to the bulletin board, the timeline taped to the refrigerator with military precision. When he finally looked at her, Emma saw something she'd never seen in his face before: pity. "My mother called last night, after dinner with my aunts and cousins. They know things, Em. About your family. About your father." The pen slipped from Emma's fingers, leaving a small blue mark on the pristine seating chart. "What do you mean they know things?" "About his drinking. About what happened when you were in college. The arrests, the time you had to bail him out, the rehab attempts that didn't work." David's voice was steady, but she could hear the careful control in it, like someone reading from a script they'd rehearsed. "They know about the night you had to pick him up from that bar downtown when you were supposed to be studying for finals. They know about the time he showed up drunk at your graduation." Emma's world tilted. Those moments lived in the deepest, most carefully guarded corners of her memory. She'd shared them with David during their most intimate conversations, in the dark safety of their bedroom, trusting him with the parts of her story that still made her stomach clench with old shame. Her father's alcoholism had been the central chaos of her childhood and young adulthood, the reason she had learned to be hyper-responsible, hyper-organized, hyper-vigilant about creating the kind of stable life that felt like sanctuary. "Concerns," she repeated, tasting the word like poison. "About my family's patterns. You have to understand, they've worked so hard to build what we have. My father's practice, our reputation in the community. They're protective of that." David's voice carried a pleading note that made something hard and cold settle in Emma's chest. They think maybe we should wait. Take some time to really consider what we're building together." "They think," Emma said, her voice finding a steadiness that surprised her. "What do you think, David?" The silence stretched between them like a chasm. In that pause, Emma saw their entire relationship with brutal clarity. David's careful deference to his family's opinions, his discomfort whenever she mentioned her father's struggles, the way he'd never quite defended her when his mother made her subtle comments about Emma's unconventional background. She told herself it was just his way of keeping peace, of not rocking the boat that carried his family's expectations. Now she understood it was something much worse. It was cowardice. "I love you," he said finally, but the words felt hollow, like an apology for what was coming next. "But I can't go into marriage with my family opposed to it. They're my foundation, Em. They're who I am." Emma stood slowly, her legs feeling unsteady beneath her. Around them, all the carefully planned details of their future seemed to mock her with their optimism. The save the dates that had gone out 3 months ago, the dress hanging in her closet, altered to perfection, the venue deposit, the catering contract, the photographer who'd already scouted their ceremony location. "So that's it?" she asked. "Someone tells your family about the worst parts of my life and you just fold?" "It's not that simple." "It is exactly that simple." The anger was beginning to build now, burning through the shock like fire through kindling. "Someone took the most private, painful parts of my story and used them as weapons. And instead of standing with me, instead of asking how they could possibly know these things or why someone would share them, you're letting your family use them to end our engagement?" David's face crumpled slightly. "I know how it sounds, but you don't understand the pressure they're putting on me, the things they're saying about what our children might inherit, about addiction running in families. Get out." The words surprised them both. Emma hadn't planned to say them, but they emerged with the force of absolute certainty. "Em, please, can't we just get out?" Louder this time, carrying 3 years of swallowed doubts and accommodated slights. "Take your ring and your family's concerns and get out of my apartment." David reached for her hand, but she stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself like armor. After a long moment, he pulled the engagement ring from his pocket. When had he taken it off? And set it gently on the coffee table next to a stack of reception table numbers. "I'm sorry," he said, but the words felt like they were already echoing from a great distance. "I do love you. I hope someday you'll understand." The door closed behind him with a soft click that seemed to reverberate through Emma's chest. She stood frozen in the center of her living room, surrounded by the debris of her carefully constructed future. The wedding dress hanging in her bedroom closet, the honeymoon reservations that had been carefully planned, the life insurance policies they'd updated to include each other, the apartment lease they'd signed together just 6 months ago. But underneath all the practical devastation was something much worse. The knowledge that someone close to her had deliberately destroyed everything she'd built. Someone who knew her well enough to understand exactly which secrets would cause the most damage. Someone who looked at her happiness and decided to take it away. Emma walked slowly to her bedroom, her legs moving without conscious direction. The wedding dress hung on the outside of her closet door, where she'd placed it so she could see it every morning, a daily reminder of the future she was building toward. The ivory silk seemed to glow in the dim light, its intricate beadwork catching the last rays of afternoon sun. She reached out and touched the fabric, feeling its weight in her fingers. 3 months of fittings, countless hours spent choosing between nearly identical shades of white. A dress that would now hang unworn, a symbol of dreams that someone had deliberately shattered. As she stood there, one thought began to crystallize through her grief and shock. This was planned. Someone knew exactly what information would devastate David's family, had understood their prejudices and fears well enough to exploit them. This wasn't random gossip or accidental disclosure. This was surgical, intentional, cruel. And Emma was going to find out who had done it. The wedding dress swayed slightly in the draft from the heating vent, its empty form a ghost of the woman she'd planned to become. But that woman, the accommodating, hopeful bride who'd bent herself into shapes to please David's family,
was gone now. In her place stood someone harder, someone who understood that the people you trust most are often the ones with the power to destroy you most completely. Emma's reflection stared back at her from the full-length mirror beside the dress. Her face was pale, her eyes bright with unshed tears, but there was something else there now. Something sharp and determined and dangerous. Someone had declared war on her happiness. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. They just didn't know she was going to fight back. Marcus's hand stilled on his coffee cup when Emma's voice cracked through the phone at 2 a.m. He'd known this call was coming, had been waiting for it actually, ever since he'd seen Claire having lunch with Isabella Chen at Bistro Moderne last Tuesday. The sight had lodged itself in his chest like a splinter, sharp and wrong. But he told himself it was probably nothing. Just two women having lunch. Coincidences happen.
Now, listening to Emma's raw recounting of David's betrayal, Marcus understood it had been anything but coincidental. Someone told them, Marcus. Someone who knew exactly what would destroy me. Emma's voice carried a coldness he'd never heard before, even during their worst college heartbreaks. I need to know who. Marcus set his cup down carefully, buying time. He could tell her what he'd seen right now, end her investigation before it consumed her, but something in her tone warned him that the truth might be worse than the searching. Maybe you should just... Don't. The word cut through the night like a blade. Don't tell me to let it go or move on or any of that shit. Someone took my life and threw it away for sport. I need names. For the next 3 hours, Emma methodically dissected her relationships with the precision of a surgeon. She called college friends, traced social media connections, analyzed every conversation she could remember having about her father. Marcus listened to her transform into someone he barely recognized, calculating, relentless, stripped of the warmth that had defined their 15-year friendship. The breakthrough came when Emma cornered their mutual friend Jessica at a coffee shop downtown. Jessica, clearly uncomfortable, mentioned seeing Claire post a photo from Bistro Moderne last week, a photo that had been quickly deleted. Claire was at Bistro Moderne when? Marcus felt his stomach drop. He'd seen that lunch, seen the way Claire leaned forward conspiratorially, seen Isabella Chen's shocked expression gradually shift to something harder. He'd watched his best friend's sister orchestrate her betrayal in real time and done nothing to stop it. Marcus, Emma's voice had gone deadly quiet. You know something. The silence stretched between them like a confession. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice barely audible. I saw them together, Claire and David's mother, last Tuesday at lunch. Emma's sharp intake of breath cut through the phone line. When she spoke again, her voice carried a rage so pure it was almost crystalline. My own sister, my own fucking sister destroyed my life because she couldn't stand to see me happy? Marcus tried to find words of comfort, of reason, but Emma had already hung up. He sat in his kitchen as dawn broke over the city, understanding that whatever came next would change their family forever. Emma stared at her phone, Claire's name glowing on the screen like an accusation. 3 years of wedding planning, of dreams built brick by brick, destroyed by jealousy masquerading as sisterly love. The betrayal cut deeper than David's cowardice, deeper than Isabella Chen's prejudice. This was blood turning against blood, and Emma was going to make sure Claire paid for it. Emma applied the same methodical precision to studying her sister's life that she'd once used for marketing research campaigns. Claire's social media became her case study, every perfectly curated post dissected for inconsistencies, every tagged location mapped for patterns. The surface showed exactly what Claire wanted the world to see: designer handbags, romantic dinners with Miguel, their renovated craftsman home in the suburbs. But Emma had learned to look deeper. Sunday dinner at their mother's house became reconnaissance.
Emma watched Miguel's hands shake as he reached for the wine bottle, noticed how he excused himself for phone calls during family conversations. When Rosa asked about their finances, something about refinancing the house, Claire's laugh carried a brittle edge, and Miguel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Everything's fine, Mama," Claire had said, but her fingers twisted her wedding ring. Miguel's distressed about work. Emma filed away every micro-expression, every nervous gesture. Her marketing background had taught her to read consumer behavior, to spot the gaps between what people said and what they actually wanted. Miguel was hiding something significant, and Claire either didn't know or was pretending not to. The breakthrough came during Claire's housewarming party 3 weeks later. Emma volunteered to help set up, arriving early to observe the space with fresh eyes. While Claire arranged flowers in the kitchen, Emma excused herself to use the bathroom, her route taking her past Miguel's home office. The door stood slightly ajar. Through the gap she glimpsed his computer screen, a casino website, balance showing negative numbers that made her stomach drop. Multiple browser tabs were open: debt consolidation services, payday loan companies, addiction help forums. Miguel's search history painted a picture of desperation that made her chest tighten with unexpected sympathy. "Finding everything okay?" Miguel's voice behind her made her jump. She turned, studying his face with new understanding. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usual easy smile looked strained. This wasn't a man living Claire's Instagram perfect life. This was someone drowning. "Just looking for the bathroom," Emma said carefully. Miguel's gaze flicked to his office door, then back to her face. For a moment she saw recognition there, the look of someone who understood what it meant to carry secrets that could destroy everything you built. "Down the hall," he said quietly. "Second door." As the party progressed, Emma watched Miguel nurse a single beer while other guests drank freely. He checked his phone obsessively, each glance followed by a barely concealed wince. When someone mentioned the local casino's new poker tournaments, he excused himself to the kitchen, returning minutes later with the careful composure of someone who just had a panic attack.
Claire remained oblivious, playing the perfect hostess, accepting compliments on their beautiful home and successful marriage. She glowed with the satisfaction of someone whose life appeared flawless from every angle. Emma understood the power she now held. Miguel's gambling addiction was a loaded weapon, one that could obliterate Claire's perfect facade as completely as Claire had destroyed Emma's engagement. The knowledge sat heavy in her chest, both thrilling and nauseating. As she drove home that night, Emma's hands trembled on the steering wheel. She'd crossed a line from victim to hunter, and the person in her crosshairs was someone who clearly loved her sister despite his demons. But Claire had chosen this war when she decided to weaponize Emma's deepest vulnerabilities. If collateral damage was inevitable, Claire should have considered that before firing the first shot. Emma pulled into her apartment complex, her phone already in her hand. Miguel's weakness had given her the ammunition she needed. The only question now was whether she had the stomach to use it. Emma stared at her phone for 3 days, Miguel's number highlighted in her contacts like a loaded gun. Each time she started to dial, her finger would hover over the call button before her conscience pulled her back from the edge. The information about his gambling addiction felt radioactive in her hands, powerful enough to destroy Claire's marriage, but guaranteed to obliterate an innocent man in the process. Marcus found her on Thursday evening, sitting in her apartment surrounded by wedding debris she hadn't had the strength to pack away. Invitation samples scattered across her coffee table like fallen leaves, the engagement ring David had left behind catching light from the setting sun. "You look like hell," Marcus said, settling beside her on the couch. "I feel worse." Emma's voice was hoarse from 3 sleepless nights. "I know something about Miguel, something that would end their marriage." Marcus studied her face with the careful attention of someone who'd watched his best friend disappear into herself over the past month. "And you're considering using it?" It wasn't a question. Emma had never been able to hide anything from Marcus. Not her feelings, not her plans, and certainly not the darkness that had been growing in her chest since David walked out. "She destroyed my life, Marcus, deliberately, methodically, while pretending to be my loving sister." Emma's hands clenched into fists. Miguel has a gambling problem. Serious debt. Claire has no idea. One phone call and her perfect little world implodes just like mine did. And then what? Marcus's voice carried the quiet intensity of someone trying to talk a friend off a ledge. You hurt Miguel, who's never done anything to you. You become the kind of person who destroys marriages for revenge. And Claire, she'll know it was you. This won't end the war, Em. It'll escalate it. Emma stood abruptly, pacing to her window. Outside, her neighbor was teaching his daughter to ride a bicycle, running alongside her with his hands steady on her back. The scene looked impossibly normal, impossibly peaceful. A life where families supported each other instead of weaponizing intimate knowledge for maximum damage. She chose this, Emma said finally. When she decided my happiness was expendable, that doesn't mean you have to choose it too. Their conversation was interrupted by Rosa's arrival. Emma's mother let herself in with a spare key, carrying grocery bags and wearing the expression of someone who'd reached the end of her patience with her daughter's mutual destruction. "Enough," Rosa announced, setting the bags on Emma's kitchen counter with more force than necessary. "I can feel the poison between you and Claire from across town. What happened?" Emma and Marcus exchanged glances. Rosa worked double shifts as a nurse, had barely recovered from her own divorce, and was already carrying enough emotional weight for 3 people. The last thing she needed was to learn that one daughter had betrayed the other so completely. "David and I broke up," Emma said carefully. "Claire and I had a fight about it." Rosa's knowing look suggested she wasn't buying the simplified version. "Mija, I've been your mother for 28 years. I know when you're planning something that will hurt people." Her voice softened with exhaustion. "Whatever Claire did, whatever you're thinking of doing back, this family has enough broken pieces." After Rosa left, Emma sat in the growing darkness of her apartment, her phone heavy in her hands. Her mother's words echoed alongside Marcus's warnings, but underneath both was the sharper voice of her own pain, raw, demanding, unhealed. At 11:47 p.m., Emma finally dialed Miguel's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep and something that might have been relief. "Emma? I know about the gambling, about the debt, about the casino websites." The silence stretched so long she wondered if he'd hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was broken. "Please don't tell Claire. I'm trying to stop. I'm trying to fix it." "I should tell her yourself," Emma said, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Because if you don't, I will. Tomorrow." She hung up before he could respond, her hands shaking as she set the phone aside. Across town, she knew Miguel was probably staring at his own phone, understanding that his world was about to collapse just like hers had. Emma closed her eyes and waited for satisfaction to fill the hollow space in her chest. Instead, she felt only the weight of becoming someone she no longer recognized. The pounding on Emma's door started at dawn, urgent, desperate strikes that echoed through her apartment like gunfire. Emma had been sitting in her kitchen since 4 a.m., nursing cold coffee and waiting for this moment. She knew Claire would come. The only surprise was that it took 8 hours. "Emma!" Claire's voice cracked through the wood. "Open this door right now!"
When Emma turned the deadbolt, Claire burst through like a hurricane. Her usually perfect hair hung in matted strands, yesterday's makeup smeared into dark circles beneath her eyes. She wore the same clothes from Miguel's revelation, wrinkled, tear-stained evidence of a marriage combusting in real time. "You vindictive bitch." Claire's voice shook with exhaustion and pure fury. "Miguel told me what you did, the phone call, the ultimatum." Emma closed the door slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. "I gave him a choice. Same choice you gave David's family when you decided to share my personal business. Don't you dare compare—" Claire stopped mid-sentence, her face contorting with recognition. "You knew. Somehow you figured out it was me. Your lunch with Isabella Chen, Bistro Moderne, 2 weeks before David's family suddenly knew intimate details about my father's drinking." Emma's voice carried the steady precision of a closing argument. Did you enjoy it? Planning my destruction over Caesar salads? Claire's facade cracked completely. The polished, Instagram-perfect version of herself that she'd maintained for years crumbled, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. You have no idea what it's like being your sister. Enlighten me. Everything comes so easily to you. Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect fiancé. You sail through life while I'm drowning, and everyone just expects me to smile and celebrate your success. Emma stared at her sister, seeing clearly for the first time the jealousy that had been poisoning their relationship. You think my life is easy? You think building a career while managing Dad's alcoholism was effortless? You were his favorite, she shot back, her voice breaking. Even drunk, even at his worst, you were still Daddy's responsible little helper. I was just the pretty disappointment who couldn't handle crisis. The accusation hit Emma like a slap. I wasn't his favorite. I was his caretaker. There's a difference. Is there? Claire laughed bitterly. You got to be the hero, the one who solved problems, who held everything together. Do you know what it's like watching your sister manage every family crisis while you fall apart? Being the daughter who's too weak to help? Emma felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. All these years, she'd seen Claire's distance during family emergencies as selfishness. She'd never considered it might be shame. So you decided to make me fall apart too. I wanted you to know what it felt like, to have someone judge you for things you couldn't control, to lose something precious because your past wasn't good enough. I wanted you to feel as small as I've felt my entire life. Well, congratulations. Emma's voice turned arctic. Mission accomplished. But here's the thing about starting wars, Claire. Sometimes the other side fights back. They faced each other across Emma's living room, both breathing hard. 28 years of competition and resentment finally laid bare between them. Two sisters who'd shared a childhood but had never really understood each other. Miguel left, Claire whispered, the fight draining from her voice. He packed a bag and walked out. Said he couldn't trust me after the way I reacted to his confession. My marriage is over because you couldn't stand to see me happy. Your marriage was built on secrets. Emma's voice felt hollow even as she spoke them. If Miguel had been honest, he was trying to fix it. He was getting help. Claire's voice cracked. But you couldn't let him have that chance, could you? You had to destroy everything, just like you always do when you don't get your way. I don't get my way? Emma's composure finally snapped. You torpedoed my engagement out of pure spite, and now you're playing victim? We're done. Claire moved toward the door, her voice carrying terrible finality. Whatever we were as sisters, it's over. I never want to see you again. The door slammed with such force that Emma's wedding pictures rattled on the mantel, the few she hadn't had the strength to take down yet. She stood alone in the sudden silence, surrounded by the debris of two destroyed relationships and the bitter realization that winning felt exactly like losing. The poison of revenge had infected everything it touched, leaving nothing but wreckage in its wake. The fallout spread like shrapnel from an explosion, hitting everyone in the Rodriguez family with devastating precision. Rosa discovered the truth 3 days after Claire's confrontation with Emma, when she found Miguel sitting in his car outside her apartment building at midnight, staring at nothing. "Mijo, what are you doing here?" Rosa approached the driver's side window, her nurse's instincts immediately cataloging the signs of a man in crisis. Hollow eyes, trembling hands, the particular stillness of someone who'd stopped believing in their own future. I didn't know where else to go. Miguel's voice was barely audible. Claire threw me out. Everything's destroyed.
Rosa listened in growing horror as Miguel explained about the gambling, about Emma's ultimatum, about Claire's explosive reaction to learning her marriage was built on lies. By the time he finished, Rosa understood that her daughter's war had claimed its first innocent casualty. Emma felt the ripple effects at work, where her colleagues had begun noticing her distraction. 3 client presentations had been postponed because she couldn't focus, and her assistant Sarah had started fielding calls about missed deadlines. The Emma who'd built her career on precision and reliability had been replaced by someone who stared at spreadsheets without seeing numbers.
Everything okay? Sarah asked tentatively during their Monday morning meeting. You seem distant lately. Emma wanted to explain that her entire family had imploded, that revenge felt like acid in her veins, that she'd become someone she didn't recognize. Instead, she nodded and promised to catch up on the McKinley account by Friday. David's attempt at reconciliation came through a text message that made Emma's stomach clench with disgust. Heard about you and Claire. I'm sorry. Maybe we could talk? She deleted it without responding. The man who'd abandoned her at the first sign of family disapproval now wanted to comfort her through family destruction. The irony was so bitter it made her teeth ache. Meanwhile, Claire spiraled into a depression that frightened Rosa. She'd taken a leave of absence from her job, stopped answering her phone, and lived on takeout containers stacked like monuments to misery throughout her empty house. When Rosa visited, she found her younger daughter wearing the same clothes for days, scrolling mindlessly through social media posts of other people's happiness. You need to eat something, Rosa pleaded, setting a plate of homemade tamales on Claire's coffee table. Why? Claire's voice was hollow. So I can have energy to hate myself more efficiently? The worst part was watching Miguel try to rebuild his life alone. He'd moved into a studio apartment across town and started attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings, his shame so profound that he could barely make eye contact with Rosa during their weekly coffee meetings. I love her, he told Rosa during one particularly painful conversation, but I can't forgive how she looked at me when she found out. Like I was garbage, like our entire marriage was contaminated. Rosa sat in her own apartment each night, surrounded by photos of her daughter's happier times, and wondered how she'd failed so completely as a mother. She'd survived her husband's alcoholism, a bitter divorce, and years of financial struggle, only to watch her children destroy each other with the precision of surgical strikes. The family was broken, possibly beyond repair, and the 2 people responsible, Emma and Claire, seemed incapable of seeing past their own pain to understand what they'd lost. Rosa realized that she would have to choose between being a neutral observer and being the force that either healed her family or buried it completely. She chose intervention, even if it meant risking everything that remained. Emma stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror of her office building, barely recognizing the woman looking back. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usually immaculate appearance had deteriorated into something that screamed professional crisis. She'd won her war against Claire, but victory felt like drowning in slow motion. The satisfaction she'd expected never came. Instead, a hollow ache had settled in her chest where vindication should have lived. She'd imagined feeling powerful, justified, somehow healed by Claire's destruction. Instead, she felt like she was disappearing piece by piece. Marcus found her in the parking garage after work, leaning against her car and staring at nothing. He'd been giving her space since the explosion, but the woman before him looked so lost that his protective instincts overrode his disappointment in her choices. "When's the last time you ate something?" he asked gently. "I don't remember. Does it matter?" "Emma, look at me." Marcus turned her to face him, his hands steady on her shoulders. "This isn't you. The person who destroyed her sister's marriage out of spite, that's not who you are." "Isn't it?" Emma's laugh was bitter. "Maybe this is exactly who I am. Maybe all that responsible, loyal sister stuff was just performance until someone pushed me far enough." "Bullshit." Marcus's voice carried the authority of 15 years of friendship. "You're in pain, and pain makes people do terrible things. But you're not a terrible person." Emma pulled away from him, wrapping her arms around herself like armor. "Tell that to Miguel. Tell that to Claire.
I took a good man's addiction and used it as a weapon because I wanted my sister to hurt the way I was hurting. And does she? The question hung between them like a challenge. Emma thought of Claire's ravaged face during their confrontation, the way her sister's voice had cracked when she talked about Miguel leaving. The perfect facade Claire had maintained for years had crumbled completely, leaving behind someone as broken as Emma felt. Yes, Emma whispered. She's destroyed. Her marriage is over, her reputation is in ruins, and she knows I did it deliberately. She's exactly as miserable as I wanted her to be. And how does that feel? Emma closed her eyes, expecting to find satisfaction in the admission. Instead, she found only emptiness. Like poison. Like I've become someone I don't want to be. Marcus nodded slowly. That's because revenge doesn't heal wounds, Em. It just creates new ones. Claire hurt you, so you hurt her back, and now you're both bleeding out while innocent people get caught in the crossfire.
I can't take it back, Emma's voice broke. Miguel's life is ruined. Claire will never forgive me, and I don't know how to live with what I've done. You start by admitting you were wrong, not just about the method, but about the goal. You thought destroying Claire would fix what David broke, but it just broke you instead. Emma leaned against her car, feeling the weight of her choices settling on her shoulders like concrete. She'd spent weeks planning Claire's destruction with the precision of a military campaign, but she'd never considered what would happen to her own soul in the process. I don't know how to come back from this, she admitted. One choice at a time, Marcus said quietly. Starting with deciding whether you want to keep being the kind of person who destroys families, or whether you want to try being the Emma I used to know. Emma stared at the ground, understanding that the hardest part of her journey wasn't behind her, it was just beginning. Emma found Miguel at a coffee shop near his new apartment, hunched over a laptop with the careful posture of someone trying to make themselves invisible. She'd spent 3 days rehearsing this conversation, but seeing him in person, thinner, older, carrying the weight of his destroyed marriage, made all her prepared words feel inadequate. Miguel, she approached his table slowly, like someone approaching a wounded animal. Can we talk? He looked up, and Emma saw recognition flicker across his face, along with something that might have been fear. I don't think that's a good idea. Please, 5 minutes. Emma sat across from him before he could refuse. I need to apologize. Miguel's laugh was hollow. For what? For exposing my addiction? For giving an ultimatum? Or for destroying my marriage when I chose honesty over lies? The words hit Emma like physical blows. For all of it. For using your struggles as a weapon against Claire. For not giving you the chance to handle it yourself. For caring more about hurting my sister than protecting innocent people. Innocent. Miguel repeated the word like it tasted bitter. I wasn't innocent, Emma. I was a gambling addict who lied to my wife every day for 2 years. But you were trying to fix it. You were getting help. Was I? Miguel closed his laptop, his movements sharp with frustration. Or was I just telling myself that while I kept digging the hole deeper? Maybe your ultimatum was the push I needed to finally be honest. Emma studied his face, searching for absolution she didn't deserve. Did it help, the honesty? It ended my marriage. Miguel's voice carried a finality that made Emma's chest tighten. Claire couldn't look at me the same way after she learned about the debt, the lying, the money I'd stolen from our savings account. Your ultimatum didn't destroy our marriage, Emma. My addiction did. You just expedited the inevitable. The conversation wasn't going the way Emma had planned. She'd expected Miguel to rage at her, to blame her for his losses. His calm acceptance of responsibility somehow made her feel worse than anger would have. I'm sorry, she said again, the words feeling pathetically small. I'm sorry I used your pain as ammunition. I'm sorry I didn't give you the chance to come clean on your own terms. Miguel nodded slowly. I know you are, but sorry doesn't give me my wife back, does it? Emma tried calling Claire 3 times before her sister finally answered, her voice flat and emotionless. What do you want, Emma? To apologize, to try to fix what I broke. Some things can't be fixed. Claire's voice was ice cold. My marriage is over. My husband is gone. And you? You're exactly the person I always suspected you were underneath all that responsibility. Claire, please.
The line went dead. Rosa's intervention came 2 weeks later, in the form of a mandatory family meeting at her apartment. Both daughters arrived reluctantly, Emma driven by guilt and Claire by obligation to their mother. They sat on opposite ends of Rosa's living room like enemies in a ceasefire. "This stops now," Rosa announced without preamble. "This war between you two has destroyed Miguel's life, ruined Claire's marriage, and turned Emma into someone I don't recognize. I won't watch my daughters tear each other apart anymore." "Mama, you don't understand," Claire began. "I understand perfectly. I understand that you betrayed Emma's trust out of jealousy, and I understand that Emma destroyed your marriage out of revenge. I understand that you're both so consumed with hurting each other that you've forgotten how to be human beings." Emma and Claire sat in stunned silence. Rosa had never spoken to them this harshly, had always been the peacemaker, the enabler, the one who smoothed over conflicts instead of confronting them. "Your father's alcoholism taught me something. Toxic patterns don't heal themselves. They get passed down from generation to generation until someone has the courage to break the cycle. You two can keep destroying each other, or you can choose to do the work of healing. But I won't enable this mutual destruction anymore." Emma looked across the room at Claire, seeing her sister clearly for the first time in months. The perfect facade was gone, replaced by someone as broken and lost as Emma felt. They were both casualties of a war that had no winners, only survivors. "I don't know how to forgive her," Claire whispered. "I don't know how to forgive myself," Emma replied. Rosa nodded. "Then that's where we start, with admitting you don't know how, but choosing to try anyway." The silence that followed felt different, not empty, but full of possibility. For the first time since David's betrayal, Emma felt something other than rage or emptiness. She felt hope, fragile and uncertain, but real. Healing wouldn't be easy. Trust, once shattered, took years to rebuild. But in that moment, surrounded by the debris of their family, both sisters made the choice to stop actively destroying each other. It was a beginning. 6 months after Rosa's intervention, Emma sat in Dr. Sarah Chen's office, no relation to David's family, thankfully, staring at the box of tissues that had become an unwelcome constant in her weekly sessions. Therapy was like archaeological work, carefully excavating layers of damage to understand how a responsible, successful woman had become someone capable of destroying lives for revenge. "You mentioned your father again," Dr. Chen observed. "How has alcoholism shaped your need for control?" "I spent my childhood managing chaos. Covering for him, cleaning up his messes, being the stable one. When David left, when Claire betrayed me, I couldn't control the outcome, so I created chaos I could control." "And how does that feel now, looking back at your choices?" Emma considered the question. 6 months ago, she would have defended her actions or wallowed in self-hatred. Now she felt something more complex, understanding without absolution. Like I became the very thing I'd spent my life trying to escape, someone who destroyed other people's stability because my own had been taken away. Across town, Claire sat in her own therapist office, working through her own patterns of self-destruction. Dr. Martinez had helped her understand that her sabotage of Emma's engagement wasn't really about Emma at all. It was about Claire's deep-seated belief that she didn't deserve happiness, so no one else should have it either. "I've always felt like a supporting character in my own life," Claire admitted during one particularly difficult session. "Emma was the responsible one, the successful one. I was just pretty, decorative. So when she got engaged to someone wonderful, it felt like proof that I really was as worthless as I'd always suspected." The work was exhausting for both sisters. Some days, therapy felt like progress. Other days, it felt like drowning in slow motion, forced to examine every toxic thought and destructive impulse until raw honesty became unbearable. Meanwhile, Miguel had thrown himself into recovery with the same intensity he'd once brought to gambling. Gamblers Anonymous meetings 3 times a week, a sponsor who checked in daily, and a part-time job at a nonprofit helping other addicts. Work that paid poorly, but fed his soul in ways his corporate career never had. He and Claire maintained careful distance, communicating only through lawyers about divorce proceedings.
But sometimes, late at night, they would text each other. Nothing romantic, just updates on their respective healing journeys. Small acknowledgments that they'd once loved each other, even if that love hadn't been enough to survive the weight of secrets and lies. Emma's professional life slowly stabilized as she learned to channel her analytical skills into healing rather than destruction. She'd started volunteering at a domestic violence center, helping women navigate the practical aspects of leaving dangerous situations. The work was difficult but meaningful, a way to use her organizational abilities for protection rather than punishment. The sisters maintained their distance, but the act of warfare had ended. They attended family dinners at Rose's house on alternating Sundays, a careful choreography that allowed them to support their mother without having to face each other. Rosa reported on each daughter's progress to the other, serving as a bridge across the chasm their choices had created. Emma had started dating someone new, a quiet architect named James who knew her history and didn't try to fix her. Their relationship moved slowly, built on honesty rather than the careful performance that had characterized her engagement to David. James had his own struggles, a divorce, custody battles, the particular exhaustion of rebuilding life after it falls apart. "I like that you're not perfect," he told her one evening as they walked through the park where she used to plan her wedding with David. "Perfect people are exhausting to love." The comment made Emma think about Claire, about how her need to appear flawless was its own kind of prison. Maybe they'd both been performing versions of themselves for so long that they'd forgotten who they actually were underneath. Claire had made a different choice. She decided to stay single for now, focusing on understanding herself before trying to build something with someone else. The house that she'd shared with Miguel was up for sale too full of memories and broken dreams to feel like home anymore. She'd started painting again, something she hadn't done since college. Her canvases were dark and chaotic, full of jagged lines and bleeding colors, but they felt honest in a way her perfectly curated social media presence never had. "I don't know if Emma and I will ever be close again," Claire told Dr. Martinez during one particularly difficult session. "But I'm starting to understand that maybe that's okay. Maybe some relationships are too damaged to fully repair, but that doesn't mean we have to keep damaging them." Both sisters were learning to live with consequences, not just the external wreckage of their choices, but the internal work of becoming people they could respect. It was slow, unglamorous work, measured in small victories and frequent setbacks. But for the first time in years, they were both moving forward instead of sideways, building something real instead of maintaining beautiful facades that crumbled under pressure. Healing, they discovered, looked nothing like the happy endings they'd imagined. It was messier, more uncertain, and infinitely more valuable than the perfect lives they had tried to construct and destroy. The work continued, one day at a time. 18 months later, Emma received the text at 3:47 a.m. "She's here, healthy, beautiful, Miguel." Claire had given birth to a daughter, Sofia Elena Martinez, the baby who would grow up in a world where her parents were divorced, where her aunt and mother maintained careful distance, where family gatherings required strategic planning to avoid explosions, but also a baby who'd be born into a family that had learned, through devastating trial and error, the difference between performing love and actually practicing it. Emma stared at the hospital address Miguel had included, her thumb hovering over her phone screen. She and Claire hadn't spoken directly in over a year, communicating only through Rose's careful mediation. The last time they'd been in the same room, Claire had told Emma she never wanted to see her again. But this was different. This was new life, hope embodied in 8 pounds of possibility. Emma found Miguel in the hospital corridor, looking exhausted but radiant in the way of new fathers. He'd been present for the birth despite the divorce, a decision that had required months of careful negotiation between Claire's therapist, his sponsor, and both their lawyers. "How is she?" Emma asked.
"Perfect. Terrifying. I held her for 10 minutes and understood why people write terrible poetry about their children." Miguel's smile was genuine, the first truly happy expression Emma had seen from him since before his marriage collapsed. "Claire, she wants to see you." Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. "Are you sure?" "She asked for you specifically. said she didn't want Sophia to be born into a family where her mother and aunt were strangers. Claire's hospital room was dimly lit, filled with the quiet beeping of monitors and the surreal calm that follows major life events. Claire looked exhausted but luminous, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in pink hospital blankets. When she looked up at Emma, her eyes held no anger, just bone-deep tiredness and something that might have been relief. "She's beautiful," Emma whispered, stepping closer to the bed. "She is." Claire's voice was hoarse from labor, but steady. "Emma, sit down, please." Emma perched on the edge of the visitor's chair, acutely aware that this was the first conversation they'd had without mediators or fury since their explosive confrontation 18 months ago. "I've been thinking," Claire began, her eyes fixed on her daughter's sleeping face, "about cycles. About what we inherited from Dad's drinking, from Mom's enabling, from our own damage. I don't want Sophia to grow up in a family where love is conditional, where women destroy each other over men who don't deserve the effort." Emma felt tears building behind her eyes. "Claire, I'm so sorry for everything. For using Miguel's addiction against you, for caring more about hurting you than protecting innocent people, for becoming someone I didn't recognize." "I know you are." Claire looked up, meeting Emma's eyes directly for the first time in over a year. "And I'm sorry too. For betraying your trust with David's family over it, for sabotaging your happiness out of jealousy, for starting a war that hurt everyone we cared about." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history settling between them like sediment in still water. Neither sister tried to minimize their choices or explain away the damage they'd caused. Accountability, they'd both learned in therapy, required sitting with discomfort rather than rushing toward absolution. "I don't know if we can be close again," Claire said quietly. "The trust, it's so broken. But I want to try. For Sophia, for Mom, for ourselves. I want to try being sisters instead of enemies." Emma nodded, understanding that this wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It was something more tentative, but perhaps more valuable. The choice to stop actively hurting each other and see what could grow in the space that remained. "I'd like that," Emma said. "I'd like to be the kind of aunt who shows Sophia that family means showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Claire shifted Sophia in her arms and Emma caught a glimpse of the baby's face, wrinkled and red and impossibly perfect. A clean slate in a family that had learned to write its story more carefully. "What does Sophia mean?" Emma asked. "Wisdom." Claire's smile was soft and tired. "I figured this family could use some." Miguel appeared in the doorway, carrying coffee and wearing the cautious hope of someone who'd learned not to expect happy endings but was willing to work toward better beginnings. "Room for one more?" he asked. Emma looked at Claire, who nodded. The three adults who had been casualties of each other's choices gathered around Sofia Elena Martinez, understanding that forgiveness was not a destination, but a daily practice. They were still divorced, still healing, still carrying scars that would never fully fade, but they were choosing, moment by moment, to build something better than what they destroyed. Not perfect, but honest. Not without pain, but moving toward healing rather than away from it. Outside the hospital window, dawn broke over the city where their story had unfolded. A new day, full of possibility and the promise that some cycles could be broken, some damage could be healed, and some families could find their way back to love through the long, difficult work of choosing each other again and again. Sophia slept peacefully in her mother's arms, unaware that she was being born into a family that had learned, through devastating trial and error, the difference between love as performance and love as practice. The work would continue, one day at a time. But now it was work done together, in service of something larger than their individual pain. It was enough. It was a beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.